Hi, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Good Thursday morning. I'm Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast for a few more weeks before heading back to the belly of the Beltway. Love bringing you the news early from the West Coast because that means I've been up from forever surveying what's going on in Great Britain. The Beijing genocide games are about to get underway, so I hope you're not watching. More on that later. The biggest story of the day comes from the Telegraph in Great Britain. COVID lockdown prevented only 0.2% of deaths in first wave. Lockdowns prevented a very small number of deaths in comparison with simply trusting people to do the right thing, a new study suggests. Researchers from Johns Hopkins University in the United States, Lund University in Sweden, and the Center for Political Studies in Denmark said the costs to society far outweighed the benefits and called for lockdowns to be rejected out of hand as future pandemic policy. Now, do face masks on children in schools K through 6. Because just like everyone knew the lockdowns were stupid, everybody knows that masks on kids don't do any good. And in fact, we are leveraging the least vulnerable people to protect theoretical old folks that they somehow vector in on. Absurd. The U.S. has ordered 3,000 troops to bolster European allies, according to the Wall Street Journal. But the Financial Times says they're sending an extra 2,000 troops to Europe to bolster NATO defenses. So only the Biden administration can have a 50% different estimate in two different newspapers because of their communications policy, which is never to say anything that makes sense. They are modeled on the president. Dictator Putin, Dictator Xi will put their partnership against the U.S. on display at the Olympics, is the sort of headline from the Wall Street Journal. I added the word dictator. They're getting the gang back together again, the communist gang, the KGB agent, and who knows what Xi did. FBI Director Wray said yesterday that the scale of Chinese spying in the United States blew me away. That is really kind of Pete Williams, NBC News, really a fine correspondent. Chinese spying in the U.S. has become so widespread that the FBI is launching an average of 2 counterintelligence investigations a day to counter the onslaught, Christopher Wray said in an interview. Wray has become the U.S. government's most outspoken critic of the Chinese government's spying. In an exclusive NBC interview, he said the sheer scale of Chinese effort to steal U.S. technology shocked him when he became director in 2017. In fact, if the media had been paying attention in 2020, Vice President Mike Pence, followed by Christopher Wray, followed by Bill Barr, followed by Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, followed by the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, all gave speeches on this and tried to alert the world. Pete wasn't paying attention then. He should be. Maybe he did a story then and I missed it, but I'm glad he's covering it now. Chinese espionage in the United States makes the Russian efforts captured in the series The Americans look tame. A master class in gerrymandering, this time led by New York Democrats, according to the New York Times. Yeah, of course. I've been telling you this for weeks. Illinois and New York, they're monsters of gerrymandering. But whenever you hear from the left, the talking points about gerrymandering, they're always talking about Florida, Texas. The worst gerrymandering in America is in Massachusetts, in New York, and in Illinois, deep blue states, because gerrymandering is gerrymandering. Yesterday, Jeff Zucker resigned shortly after I went off the air. I've known Jeff since the 2016 elections. I've never worked for him. I've worked alongside of him. He is always the smartest guy in the room. And I'll keep telling you that. Jeff Zucker is a very smart guy, but he's resigned, citing an undisclosed relationship with his college, which company rules would have obliged him to do so. Someone new will be running CNN. That means changes at CNN. Seriously, if you were the king of the forest over there, not queen, not duke, not earl, who would you line up first to cancel? It's a question. 1-800-520-1234. I'm not going to beat up on Zucker. Zucker had a business model. It worked, by the way, made a lot of money. CNN.com gets a lot of hits, although FoxNews.com is catching up and will pass them soon. It's a left-wing brothel. You know, that's what it is. It's just where people go to have, the left goes to be intimate with each other online. And I don't mean that in a lewd way. I just mean that's where the lefties go when they're tired of the MSNBC swing party. They go back and forth between those two networks, neither of them matching and usually combined not meeting the Fox News cable numbers. And all told, it's between 6 and 7 million. You take the 3 cable news, it's not really America. I got more people listening to this show in a week than watch all those news channels together. and Joe Rogan dwarfs them all. So why do we care? Well, we care because CNN made Donald Trump president. And that was a Jeff Zucker programming decision. And Jeff Zucker was brilliant. He understood that there was an American appetite for Trump, and he got it done. He has not been so brilliant in a post-Trump world, because when you addict a news company to Trump, you end up doing a bunch of stories on the January 6th Rump Committee, and nobody watches. I mean, literally, nobody watches. You're down to airports and grannies. And I love airports and grannies. I don't love airport TV. So Jeff is a brilliant television executive. He'll be out on the street for about a month, and someone will hire him to do a startup. Because he's still the smartest guy in every room. Hell of fun, a lot of fun to work with, by the way. Really, a lot of fun to work with. You won't hear me say anything bad about Jeff Zucker. He offered me a job once, and I turned it down. I asked him for a job once, and he turned me down. So we both turned each other down. And I don't think we would work well together because he's wrong, but he's awfully smart. But who do you fire first at CNN? We've already got Chris Cuomo gone. And I know who I would go, but I want to hear from you. 1-800-520-1234. You're the new boss of the network. And you tell everyone, and by the way, it's not one of those situations where you come in and everything's hitting on 6 cylinders and you say, I'm not going to make any changes. I'm not going to change anything. We're just going to study for 6 months. A lot of CEOs do that. That's not the right thing. You walk in, you take about a week of meetings, and then you bring out the axe while you're still the new boss, and you fire everyone you can at a television network. Just say, clean out your desks, we'll honor your contracts, you're done. I know who I would send away first. Who would you send away first? Larry in Florida, you're not answering my question, Larry, are you? Who would you fire from CNN first?
Well, I have nothing to do with CNN.
All right, thank you, Larry. Have a good morning. Ben, the question is, who will we fire at CNN? Biden officials push to hold up $11.3 billion United States Postal Service truck contract, citing climate damage. I kid you not. Your mail is going all over, everywhere, nowhere. I love our mail guy, Jeffrey, in Northern Virginia. I've had a lot of mailmen, and this is the best mail guy ever. He works all the time. I have nothing bad to say about the USPS, except they need some trucks. So President Biden, thinking about you again, canceling their truck order because the climate. Yeah. Facebook got crushed by the market yesterday. They lost users for the first time in history. Now, can we be honest? Facebook is for middle-aged women and older. That's it. Young people use Instagram, political people use Twitter, middle-aged women and older use Facebook. Dwayne, am I right? Did Dwayne come in today?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. It's a Thursday. I guess you do show up on Thursday.
When's the last time you were on Facebook?
So I don't have, there's a Facebook account for the Hugh Hewitt show, but you run that, or Salem runs that. I don't run that. I don't go on Facebook. It's for middle-aged women.
It's well, actually there are guys that are on it, but you're still.
No, they're not. Larry O'Connor doesn't count.
Well, he's about the right age group.
Well, no, Larry lives on Facebook.
Yeah.
He does. It's kind of a sad thing. But I mean, honestly, I think, Adam, are you on Facebook? Dwayne, you're not there, are you?
I have a Facebook page. I don't think I've checked it in 6 months.
So, Ben, are you on Facebook?
Same answer as everyone else.
Yeah, it's for middle-aged women. They talk to each other. It's a club. So you can make money off of middle-aged women, like Pinterest. Dwayne lives on Pinterest. Now, that's a Dwayne thing. It's a bit of an oddity. But Facebook loses their shirt, and Jeff Zuckerberg came out, and the only way to turn Meta into something other than a middle-aged and older women site is to actually make it user-friendly and political. But if you do that, then the censors will come out. 1-800-520-1234. Which program do you cancel first if you're the new boss at CNN? I'm Hugh Hewitt. Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt, live from the West Coast on this Thursday morning. Weather is just the number one story from Texas to Maine, and I hope you're making it to your working commute destination well. Mary Katherine Ham, my colleague at Town Hall for many years, now a CNN contributor, joins me. Good morning, MK Hammer. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I am great. I am not here to talk with you about CNN and Jeff and all that sort of stuff. I actually invited you on to talk about moms with kids, but I first have to note that Fetching Mrs. Hewitt showed me a picture last night, and I believe SWAT is coming to free that swaddled baby.
Yeah, they may. You know, I'm holding her against her will. She really wants those arms out.
Yeah, have you seen our last little one, Genghis Kate, grandchild, had one of those where your arms had to be extended at 180 degrees? Have you got one of those too?
Yes, we have one of those too.
Those are my favorite, actually. So
it's just every act of desperation to keep them sleeping. That's all it is.
It is. And I thought that one worked pretty well. All right, Mary Katherine Ham, I wanted to read to you a story from NPR, which aired on January 31st at 4:18 p.m. Okay. Should we put KN95 masks on children or take all masks off? A new camp of parents, doctors, and advocates who are pro-vaccine but against mask mandates for children is getting louder. Now, the key term here in the Anya Kamenetz story is a new camp of parents. Mm-hmm. First off, I would argue that this is a previously ignored camp of parents, but what say you?
Yeah, previously ignored, previously ridiculed, if paid any attention to, camp of parents. I think it's been fairly clear throughout that extended school closures and putting masks on children as young as 2 are not effective ways to defeat the virus, right? Like, that was fairly clear, I would say, in summer of 2020. You had a lot of kids who were in school in other countries where it wasn't an issue. You had a lot of kids in school in other parts of this country in the fall of 2020 with no issues that was successfully going to school. But Northern Virginia and other blue metro areas, in their great wisdom, decided that keeping schools closed for a year was the way to go. They hurt a lot of children. A lot of parents were told that they were crazy and or desiring of child sacrifice if they wanted their children in school. And here's what the parents here and other cities learned. These folks will not move unless you make them feel this pressure. And so when it comes to masks, this is the next round, right? The masks, back when the kids were out of school for a year, were basically ransom to get them back in school. Like, okay, we will open the school doors, said the school boards, but you have to mask them the entire time they're here. It's universal. It's all the time. A bunch of parents went, okay. Let's just get them back in the doors of the school. Now this is the next battle. And parents will not shut up about it because they know that if they don't talk and they don't tell these people what to do, they will do this for another 2 years.
Now, I believe there is a rising out of the Asia steppe, a vast horde of horse-riding carriers of political retribution, and you and Bethany Mandel and many others of our acquaintance are leading that, and they're going to get swept away. Loudoun County yesterday, this poor assistant principal is reading a bulletin from Stasi Central at Loudoun County, and I don't want to blame her. She's just given the news on a conference call with parents. Let's listen to it, cut number 11.
Until you arrive, your children will be held in an in-school restriction situation here at school. It is important that I point out to you, it's stated in the letter that you'll receive, but it's important that I point out to you that they are not allowed on campus or on Loudoun County Public School property. Starting tomorrow, it will be considered trespassing. So it's important that I make that statement to you. But we'll look forward to hearing from you via phone so you can let us know when you'll be able to pick them up.
How long can they be suspended for?
The guidelines that we're receiving from the county is student suspensions will end as soon as they are fully following mitigation policies.
So, Mary Katherine, first, the thing that slays me is the bureaucraties. It is important that I make that statement to you. Yes. I honestly flash back to Vladimir Bukovsky's Soviet memoir of To Build a Castle, My Life as a Dissenter, when they would pull him in whenever he would file a complaint with the local Soviet something or other. They would say, it is important we respond to your statement, comrade. I mean, that is really weird.
No, if you wrote Loudoun County Public Schools in a book, the editor would be like, it's a little much. It's a little much. But every story I find about them, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna click through a little bit more on this, do a little digging. This can't be right. No, It's real. They're so incredibly heavy-handed. These are elementary school students she's talking about. Elementary school. And then I was attending a virtual town hall, of course, for safety at the Fairfax County Public Schools, where they have a little softer touch over there, but still do nothing in keeping children out of school for a year. But the superintendent there wanted to highlight with a graph the compliance. It's literally a graph celebrating compliance of students in Fairfax County Public Schools. And then another slide in which he told parents, what we're going to do is we're going to use the teaching time, of which there's precious little because they barely ever go to school now, to teach mask compliance, even to children who might have medical exemption applications that were denied. People with actual learning challenges and disabilities. I mean, it is beyond insane what the links they're going to defend this thing that doesn't have data behind it. It just doesn't.
Oh, it's the Atlantic article that is then the article heard around the world. We are investing heavily in a non-pharmaceutical intervention, the benefits of which are completely unknown, but the harms of which are quite obvious and well known, in a reversal of all medical public policy. So, MKH, I know that this has radicalized my daughter, who is hitherto very well informed about politics, but not an activist, because of the quarantine rules in her school district, which causes the smart one, the scholar, I call her, to miss 20 days of school this year. And then the artful Dodger has missed like 50 days of school, and you wouldn't know it. And Genghis Kate has missed 20 days of school. She's just become crazed, and she's not, in the classic sense, a 9-to-5 working mom. I don't know how working moms do this. I really don't.
No, I have a flexible schedule, and I don't understand how people do it. Back in 2020, I offered for children who were on Zoom to come to my house because we weren't super strict about our rules, and I was like, I understand a lot of people aren't that way, but if you need help, I would like to help you because you can't handle it. In Fairfax, one of the formerly celebrated Northern Virginia school districts here, has decided that in next year's calendar they're proposing that more than half of the school weeks will be 4 days, not 5. So if you're a parent, you're going to have to book a nanny for basically 1 day a week, I guess, some kind of childcare.
Well, stop, Mary Catherine. They decided what?
In Fairfax County, the proposed calendar for next year has 20-plus weeks that are 4-day weeks instead of 5 days.
How in the world do they do that?
I don't know even how that can meet state law because you have to be in school a certain number of days for instruction. But this is the discussion here, and your reaction right there is the reaction of every mom in this area, right? And that's why Youngkin won. And people were looking at me, people who were sort of old school Virginia consultants were looking at me like, there aren't going to be Northern Virginia people who vote for Youngkin. And I'm like, no. There will be.
It's out of the Asia steppe. Come the moms on horseback, and it's the moms. I got to ask you though, when you write about this, do your colleagues believe you? I know this because I hear it from a different Southern Virginia school district, and I read the Northern, and I know the Alexandria school district. This is not a blue-red thing. This is a mom thing.
It's a mom thing, and it's crossed over, and everybody here quite clearly saw Youngkin as the solution because Terry McAuliffe, in his great wisdom, had Randy Weingarten come stump with him in Virginia. And she's the teachers union leader who, of course, wanted schools closed forever, claims and gaslights us that she wanted them open. But everyone knew that wasn't the case. Everyone knew who she was. People around here, in a way they never were, are very clear on what Democrats want for schools and what teachers unions want for schools. And they are clear on the fact that this is an adversarial relationship, and they did not realize it was before. And
Mary Catherine, last question.
Yeah.
Arthur Herman wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal, The Great Confinement. He believes we're in a realigning moment similar to 1932 because of the schools and of moms and dads to some extent. Do you agree with him? Is there a realignment being brought about by the government's failure at every level on the Great Confinement, but especially at schools?
I think the schools is the sparking issue here, and it really changed a bunch of people. Like you say, like your daughter from non-engaged to engaged, and from those who are engaged to really, really engaged. It certainly took me up the ladder when it came to activism, and I'm already an engaged person. And I just think the harm is incredible, and people saw it happening.
And you don't want smart moms mad at you. I really do think it's a fundamental axiom of politics. Do not make smart moms your enemy. Mary Katherine Ham, thank you as always. MK Hammer on Twitter. And she's got all the other social media. And you got to go find the swaddled baby because the SWAT team's on the way, MKH. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt and be right back. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined by our friend Admiral James Stavridis, United States Navy retired, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He is also, of course, the former head of Southern Command. We got so much to talk about with the Admiral in a couple of weeks. How are you, Admiral Stav? Good to talk to you again.
Good to see you, Hugh. Boy, there is a lot going on in the world today.
You know, I want to start with something that's pretty prosaic because I've been impressed by Carlos del Toro. Now, our new Secretary of the Navy has COVID, and we wish him a speedy recovery. But I saw him down in Mississippi at the Ingalls Shipbuilding. And I believe that if a SecNav is out at the shipbuilders, we're in good shape because he might be doing the layman thing. What do you think of the new SecNav? Have you talked to him yet?
Well, I've known Carlos for 20 plus years.
Of course you have.
Watch his career unfold. Just a wonderful person, a family person, and a destroyer captain, a fellow destroyer captain. He commanded our destroyer. I think he's the first Secretary of the Navy in modern times to have had command at sea in that regard. So he knows sailors. He knows how to walk a pier. He knows when to kick a pump. He knows when to rub his hand on the bridge wing and feel the salt. So I've got a lot of admiration for Carlos. He also got out of the Navy after 20 years, fine career, and then opened a small business. So he also has this business acumen. He brings private, public, maritime together beautifully, and I'm a big fan.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I've invited him to come on and talk, because if he's going to do the layman thing and act as the public advocate, we really haven't had that. Certainly in the Trump years, my biggest criticism of the Trump administration is they fumbled the ball on ship expansion. They just fumbled it 3 times. And going back through a lot of SecNavs, no one's done the layman thing, which you got to sell the public. You got to educate the public, Admiral. Do you think anyone's really been good at that since layman?
I don't. Different SecNavs have had different agendas, and we could walk through them. I think it would be nothing but boring for the most part for the listeners. But if you look at Layman, who was a Republican, but who seized the opportunity of the moment in the Cold War to truly expand the Navy globally to confront the Soviet Union, and now you have Carlos at the other end, who's a Democrat, but someone who understands we are in a renewed period of great power competition. China is building ships at a rapid pace. Russia has a highly capable fleet that they have resurrected from the ashes of the Soviet Union. We have got to increase the size and, more importantly, I think, the capabilities of the Navy.
Now, I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. I do want to get your reaction to the Washington Football Club coming up as the Washington Commanders. You were in favor of the Admirals, but the Commanders is naval.
Yeah, I'm pleased with the name, and I think every admiral has been a commander. It's a rank in the Navy that you typically hit right around the 20-year point. Here's how I look at it, Hugh. There's 2 ways this thing can go in terms of the Washington Football Club, now the Commanders. They could play really well and go to the Super Bowl, and maybe they'll become the Admirals. They'll get promoted. Or they could keep playing. They could keep playing like they've been playing, and they may end up as the Washington Ensigns. So let's hope they follow the path to further promotion. No, in all seriousness, I think it's a great rank. And let's recall, you and I, who are navalists, will think of it as a naval rank, as we should. It's a formal rank in the Navy. It's also a position of authority, the commander-in-chief, the combatant commanders, the commander of the 82nd Airborne, etc. So I think it's got some jointness going on with it. It's got some authority. It's got some power. I like the name. I'm a lifelong fan of the club, and I'm very happy to see this new name come out. I think it'll be a new chapter, and we kept the old colors. So
I'm very glad for people in D.C. who like it. I got to tell you, you're very kind to me when you call me a navalist. I'm an armchair broadcaster. That brings me to a genuine navalist who's written, your friend Mike Gallagher and mine, Congressman Gallagher, has written for Foreign Affairs, Taiwan Can't Wait, What America Must Do to Prevent a Successful Chinese Invasion. And it begins with the defense of Guam and adding some of the ships that are slated for retirement to permanent anti-missile defense of Japan and the outer islands there. What did you make of the article, which I assume you've already read, and what do you think about the timing? We can't wait.
I agree with both, and I had a chance to look at the article in draft. I think what's really remarkable in a good way about the article is it's practical. It lays out almost a shopping list of things we ought to be doing. You know, I could add a couple other things to the list, but that idea of creating a sensible list of what needs to be done and working down that list with the Taiwanese. One of the other things, by the way, in the article, this is not a giveaway financially on the part of the United States. They call for Taiwanese defense spending to rise. It's currently running, 2.2%. That's way too low of the situation they're in. As I have said myself to Madam Tsai, the leader of Taiwan, you've got to get up into the 3-4%, and they can afford it. They're one of the 30 largest economies in the world. They're a lot like Israel. They have a significant overmatch against a potential adversary set, and they need to up their technology game, up their defense spending, and the U.S. can help with that by selling them appropriate weapons systems, as well as trainers, advisors. That whole package, I think, ultimately would deter the kind of conflict that otherwise would ensue, Hugh.
Now, Admiral, I want to turn to NATO, of which you were once the Supreme Allied Commander. In General McMaster has a memoir out, Battleground, which I'm reading, and it's eerie how similar to 2014 and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and the annexation of Crimea, how eerily similar the playbook is. They've just taken out the same playbook, whether or not they pull the cord. What do you want NATO to do? I mean, genuinely, I'm at a loss for what the United States is doing, but Poland is doing a lot. Lithuania and Latvia are trying to do a lot. What do you want NATO to do?
A quick point, it's not only the 2014 playbook, it's the 2008 playbook when Putin invaded Georgia, an even smaller democracy, also a former republic of the Soviet Union located in the Caucasus. So point being, this is the third time we will have watched Vladimir Putin come at a democratic neighbor, bully them, push them, and in this case, potentially invade for a second time, as you point out, and take a chunk out of southeast Ukraine. What can we do, and what should NATO be doing? Number one, we need to arm the Ukrainians. These are tough people. I've been there many times during my tenure as SACEUR, Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. The Ukrainians deployed with us. Their military came with us to Afghanistan. They've been part of NATO missions in the Balkans, in the war against Libya even. So these are tough-minded people. They are fiercely independent, the Ukrainian ethnic side of the country, the West. They will fight. So we've got to get them more weapons. We didn't do a good job of that over the last 4 or 5 years. We're trying to accelerate it now. That switch has to close, and that's the U.S. and the NATO alliance. And the efforts you mentioned out of the countries in Europe really is grounded in the alliance. I think number two, cyber. Get cyber protection and potentially prepare to conduct offensive cyber operations, if necessary, to slow a Russian intrusion. Number three, be very clear with Vladimir Putin on the sanctions he will face. And I think you can make a coherent argument that you should give him a little taste of that now, up front. I'm not one to believe we ought to throw the whole kitchen sink at him yet, but I think a taste of that, perhaps done in some almost covert ways around the system, would not be a bad thing at all. So economic sanctions. And then finally, Hugh, I think there is political value in standing together as an alliance and saying, look, we're going to effectively decouple from Russia in terms of security, and we are going to stumble into a Cold War. And here's the point. You can't afford it, Putin. He's got a military budget that's only about $70 billion. NATO's defense budget is over $900 billion, U.S. plus Europe. He can't afford to keep up with us if he really finds himself in a Cold War. Apologize for the length, but it's a complicated and a serious situation.
Well, let me ask you, Admiral, we have 2.5 minutes left, and I want you to take the 2 minutes. I now view Poland as the new West Germany, and I now view Germany as the new Austria. I really do think Germany has effectively exited NATO, and we ought to exit Germany. What do you make of my take? Because Germany is not even allowing Lithuania to send arms that they sold to Lithuania originally to help the Ukrainians.
I think your analogy is strong on the Polish side. I think Poland is becoming a much more important role player in NATO. We often talk about UK, France, Germany, Italy as the big four. Now everyone really says the big five. They include Poland. Poland is welcoming to the U.S., wants troops there, wants more engagement, leans very hard against Russia. I think it's too soon to tell with the new German administration, brand new, and coming off 16 years with Angela Merkel, who was overall a strong supporter of the alliance. We don't know what this new coalition is going to look like. It's certainly not going to be more pro-NATO. There are going to be forces pulling it away. Why don't we have this conversation in 6 months? We'll have a better sense of where Germany is going. I think it overstates, I'll conclude, to say that they are the new Austria. They're bigger, stronger. Their military is quite capable. Let's see how they decide to use it.
Would you consider, Admiral, a plan to move? You know, we've got a lot of facilities in Germany. We spend a lot of money in Germany. We have a lot of troops in Germany. We have the hospital there. Should we move that to Poland? Should we move that to Romania, Bulgaria, someplace that's going to be in the game as opposed to threatening our sanctions from behind?
100%. If Putin invades Ukraine, we ought to take some of the 50,000 U.S. troops in Europe and bias them way forward. And that's not only Romania and Poland, I'd say it's Bulgaria as well as the Baltic states. So Putin, I hope you're listening. If your honest desire is not to see NATO troops on your borders, hey, the best way to do that, don't invade Ukraine. If he invades, you're going to watch forces flow to those borders. And we are going to stumble back into a Cold War.
From your lips to the oligarchs' ears, or who are about the only people Vladimir Putin listens to. Admiral, great to talk to you. I hope you're back on the road making speeches. I know I am. So it's back. It's open. Isn't it great to go back and see people?
It is. I'm still a little cautious of overseas travel because I don't want to pop positive in Denmark and sit there in quarantine watching Danish television for 10 days, as delightful as Danish television.
As wonderful as that might be, actually. But you're right. So good luck on your travels, Admiral James Stavridis. Follow him on Twitter at StavridisJ. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm coming right back, except, however, to release... Morning glory again, America. Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. Joined by Jim Talent, a former senator from Missouri with the Bipartisan Policy Center. And Jim and I were texting each other yesterday. It's amazing, but something good can come out of Wisconsin, including it's Mike Gallagher's new article, Taiwan Can't Wait. Senator Talent, good morning. What do you think of this?
It is the best single thing on the subject that I have read. Congressman Gallagher has outdone himself, and I heartily recommend it to all your readers. It's very accessible. I just got excited reading it. I'm gonna write about myself to point more people towards it because, well, look, everybody's talked about, not everybody, people who want to defend Taiwan in the short term have talked about dispersing our assets, getting more assets into the region, hardening bases. But Mike goes into a level of detail, and some of the things he proposes are so eminently doable and inexpensive and would not only make a difference in terms of our actual ability to defend Taiwan, but would send exactly the right signal. And I love the way he says, look, we need a Battle Force 2045, but we also need a Battle Force 2025. Ever since I've been to Washington, I'm going to rant here for 15 seconds.
Please do. Take your time.
Yeah, the department has been building the force of the future and saying we don't really need the force of the present. We're going to come up with this technology which will revolutionize military affairs 10 or 15 years down the road. And what we end up with is neither the force of the future nor sufficient force of the present. And the truth is you have to build both at the same time. We can't just do nothing the rest of the decade and the first half of the next decade, not if we want to protect our interests in Indo-PACOM. And he makes that point very, very well.
Now, if there's one, the two takeaways for me. Up the defense of Guam yesterday with anti-missile battery, and do not retire those cruisers figure out how to station them in Japan to add to the anti-missile defense that they need, given North Korea and China's erratic behavior and threat, respectively.
Yes, yes, absolutely with Guam. The second one I thought was very ingenious. The Navy just wants to retire these cruisers, and I have to say, I don't want to retire them, but keeping them sailing is going to cost a lot of money, and they're not reliable because they're so old, because we haven't been building any ships, right? But Congressman Gallagher points out we could use them as stationary air and missile defense assets in Guam and Japan. In other words, we build them up as missile defense assets, but we don't sail them. The other point he made, which is so crucial, is to invest in long lead funding for those aspects of the missiles that we need, the munitions, that take about a year to deliver. In other words, we're going to run out of ordnance very quickly in the event the balloon goes up over Taiwan. So let's at least invest in stockpiling the longer lead aspects of those munitions. And he's absolutely correct. And then we got to base as much as we can in the region.
Now, let's talk about basing in Taiwan specifically. For years and years and years, if you're our age, and you're younger than I am, we knew that the American forces in the Fulda Gap were going to get overrun by the Soviets, but they were a tripwire. They were there for the simple purpose of, you overrun them, you've brought the United States into the conflict. Would those cruisers do the same thing, permanently stationed off Taiwan without being as provocative as an American base on Taiwan?
Well, it would definitely send the signal about our intentions to defend Taiwan. I think that is important. But another thing Mike suggested, I think, is even more important, is reestablish the battle force planning operational planning with Australia and Japan, because I think one of the things that will really deter the Chinese is if they believe that there'll be horizontal escalation in the event they go after Taiwan. In other words, if they believe it will draw in other countries besides just the United States, and that would send the signal that would happen. Now, obviously, we'd have to get agreement from the Australians and the Japanese. But I think they've been sending clear signals that if we're serious, they'll get serious. So,
I hope you're right about that, but the question is, do you see it reflected in America's newspaper? I was just talking about the new SecNav with Carlos Del Toro with Stav, and Del Toro's doing a great job. He's going to shipyards. I'm happy. But do you see anything real coming out of Congress?
Yeah, I actually am more pleased with Congress than I am with the administration. For example, their increase in the defense top line, although they haven't passed the appropriations bill, and they got a little bit serious about the top line anyway. What I'm not seeing is the energy and the concentration of will, that indicates that they're actually going to defend Taiwan. And, absent that, they talk a lot about allies, and that's important, obviously, but the allies are not going to follow uncertain leadership. So we have to make some decisions, and that has to be reflected in our actions. I think actions now are much more important than words if you want to send the right signal.
I couldn't agree more. I think Jim Talent has just reiterated what Mike Gallagher wrote, and I think both of them ought to be listened to very closely, like Stavridis, like, in fact, Del Toro. And yes, I do want to say the new SecNav, Carlos Del Toro, is doing a fine job. He might be layman-like, we will see. He's certainly down at the shipyards, which is where secretaries of the Navy need to be. Jim Talent, thank you. Follow him on Twitter at Jim Talent. Follow me to hour number 3 of the Thursday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Don't go anywhere, America. Stay right there. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast these few weeks in January and February. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is Senator John Cornyn. Coming up right now, though, one of the Senator John Cornyn's future colleagues, Adam Laxalt, formerly the Attorney General of the great state of Nevada. He will be the next United States Senator from Nevada, and he joins me from the Silver State this morning. How are you, Senator? I should just call you General Laxalt at this point.
Well, let's stick with that. We feel great, but it's going to be a big year. We're going to be working really hard.
Let's start with the bunning and the base running. What's the website, Adam Laxalt?
AdamLaxalt.com.
So anyone wants to get involved across the United States, head to AdamLaxalt.com. Now, Adam, when I have on the key Senate candidates to take back the Senate, right now it's actually 49-50 Democrat-Republican because Senator Lujan is recovering for a few weeks in New Mexico. We need to win Nevada. Everybody knows that. And I ask everyone the same 5 issues: inflation, the economy, crime, borders, schools, and national security. And I'm going to go out of order this morning because you were with a group of sheriffs in Nevada yesterday blasting the disaster on the southern border. What was that all about? Who was with you? What can the president do to actually help you?
You know, it's an absolute disgrace what's going on with our border. And I stood with our sheriffs here in Nevada who had sent a letter to President Biden, as well as to Senator Masto, just asking for relief. They've had enough. A lot of these rural sheriffs and these smaller community sheriffs do not have giant police forces. And there is no question that crime is surging. Fentanyl is crashing through our communities. And a lot of our highways through rural Nevada have become these drug trafficking corridors. And they simply can't do this alone. But they're trying to uphold their duty to protect their citizens and stand by their oath. And they cannot get any backup. And so they're doing their best to stand up. As the former AG, no one did more with law enforcement than I did. And as was stated at the press conference today, we were the first AG to ever even bring law enforcement together and to continually find solutions for our communities. That's why they were supporting me today, because they know they need a partner that is going to actually push for Nevadans, unlike my opponent, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, who continues to stand with the left and all these radical open border policies.
You know, Adam Laxalt, the first thing President Biden did when he became president was to shut the Keystone Pipeline. At the same time, he opened the fentanyl pipeline. Now, I know Nevada's not a border state, but a lot of that drugs just have to go through Nevada. It's just a matter of where the interstates are.
You know, this is exactly what the sheriffs said today. We may be 1,000 miles from a border, but we are a border state when it comes to transnational drug trafficking. And it's coming through our state. Some of it's staying in our state. We have children overdosing by this stuff. And it's just, it's horrible. And I think a lot of your listeners don't really understand how deadly fentanyl is. And, if you have teenagers that just happen to be, doing recreational drugs, of course, we hope all of our kids are not doing that. But if they do, they don't know they're taking a pill that can just kill them instantly. That's what we're dealing with here, and it's a scourge. And, just shame on these people that refuse to take the most obvious steps of what President Trump did to give us a secure border and to actually allow us to control this flow. This should not be a partisan issue. But for the Democrats, this open border is somehow a holy grail for them.
Now, that also has a secondary impact on economy. Adam Laxalt, in preparing to talk to you, I discovered, to my amazement, Nevada is dead last in unemployment. You're losers. I mean, you're the worst recovery in America. What does Cortez Masto say about that, the senator who votes with Chuck Schumer 100% of the time?
She just continues to act like Joe Biden acts like. Everything's fine. What's the problem? And the bottom line is, you're right. We are 50th in unemployment. We are not recovering. And a lot of the reason we're not recovering is because we still have mask mandates, and we're still trying to follow California on a COVID response rather than let individuals make their own decisions. And, if people want to come here and they want to support our economy, great. But we continue to do the wrong things. And as a result, a lot of people have lost their jobs permanently. We have over 50% of our Hispanic small businesses were shuttered over COVID. And, Lord willing, some of those will come back. But we all know some of those will not be able to come back. Once you lose a small business and all your life's earnings that go into it, you simply can't make it back. And so, we badly need a different direction. And, as they continue to pump money into the economy and they pay people to stay home, surprise, surprise, that we can't find people that are ready to go back to work and are ready to, get our economy rocking and rolling again. And so rather than the administration wake up and understand that its economic policies have been a failure, they just continue to drive the same path. I mean, look what they did with, as you mentioned, Keystone Pipeline and shutting down the ability to look for, for energy in our federal lands. So what does that do? Obviously, it increased our gas prices. Well, you would think in a response to Ukraine, they would reverse course and start helping Americans. That's killing our people here, the high energy prices and high gas prices. But they won't.
Does Cortez Masto ever say anything? She's the invisible senator. I read 6 newspapers a day before the show. I go over all the clips that Dwayne gets. She never says anything. She never shows up anywhere. What does she do?
She does this tried and true method of keeping her head down so that she can be a chameleon in an election year. And, she's going to pretend like she's a moderate. In response to us calling her out for not supporting the border, she has made no comments about the border in the last 4 months since I've been in this race or prior, as far as I know. And they have some weak response that, she's supported the border in the past. Yeah, right. That is news to all Nevadans that she's somehow been standing against Biden and, and Secretary Mayorkas. There are no public statements of her condemning these actions. And so she's going to do her best to have it both ways. And she knows between the border and all of the anti-law enforcement issues and supporting BLM, these things are deeply unpopular.
Let's stay there for a second, Adam Laxalt, because this week there was that funeral in New York City, which demonstrated in a way that not even the legacy media could miss that Americans are behind cops. Is crime rising in Las Vegas? It's always been one of the safest cities to feel. I felt when I'm wandering around in the middle of nowhere. Is it still that way?
There's no question crime is rising in Vegas and across our state. And for the reasons you're suggesting, we cannot afford to have a reputation of an unsafe city. We are a tourist economy. If people don't feel safe, they are not going to come. And, even if it's beyond policies, it's the rhetoric that is so damaging. I know a lot of beat cops that are so upset with what's happened the last few years. And, some of these guys are 25 years old. They're putting a uniform on because they want to serve their community. And, their children are, they're made fun of at schools because their dads are cops. That is unsustainable as a society. That is unsustainable for our basic law and order, which is a fundamental job of law enforcement. And my opponent was a former attorney general. And like Kamala Harris, she used those credentials to get herself elected senator when it was convenient, but she has not stood with cops when they needed her, when we, as law enforcement, needed her over the last few years, completely MIA.
Has she stood, we're getting close to the end, has she stood with parents wanting optionality about masks for their elementary school children?
Absolutely not. When President Biden announced the mandate, I, of course, immediately said they'd be found unconstitutional, which they were.
Yep.
Silent as parents are complaining about these masks for their kids. She is silent, and we know why. Because the teachers' unions have too much money and they're too powerful, and so they will not speak out against these strong vested interests. But parents are piping hot, and it's across party, it's across demographics, because our schools have gone down, the education has gone down, kids have not been able to get the education they need. We have increase in suicides in our schools here. I mean, we have it all here, Hugh, and we need a senator that's going to stand for Nevada.
That's Adam Laxalt. Get involved early. Don't sit around complaining about the state of the world or the state of Nevada. Go to adamlaxalt.com. Contribute, sign up, get active. We got to win Nevada. We being people who care about freedom in the United States, Republicans. adamlaxalt.com. Thank you, Adam. Talk to you soon on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The breaking news is that United States forces acted in Syria on the order of President Biden earlier today and have killed the leader of ISIS. This is the first time since 2019 that American special forces have gone after an ISIS leader. At that time, they killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the founder of the group. This time, they killed a man named Qurashi. And Qurashi exploded a bomb that killed himself and members of his family, including women and children, according to a senior U.S. administration official. The Telegraph is reporting. I'm joined now by United States Senator John Cornyn. Senator Cornyn, this is good news. Another bad guy taken off the map. Kudos to the President of the United States military.
I agree with you, Hugh. We need to be sober about all this because there's plenty more where he came from. But I'm glad to see that the administration is leaning into this problem, which I fear will get worse given the calamitous withdrawal from Afghanistan and where the Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups have organized and exported their terror. But this is good news for the time being.
Yeah, when we do this and Zawahiri is in the press release, I'm really going to applaud, Senator.
That will be an important day, and I hope they're still after him.
Now, Senator, I wanted to talk to you on judiciary, and I want to talk to you about the upcoming Supreme Court process. But first, some procedural questions. The Senate is a closed place, and senators are friends across the aisle. I know you're praying for Senator Lujan and his quick recovery. We've been told he'll be back in 4 to 6 weeks. Is that what you've been told?
That's what I read, and I don't know whether that's a medical prognosis or whether that's somebody's speculation, but we wish him well.
Now, in that interim, it's a 50 Republican, 49 Democrat Senate. And Mark Kirk, a Republican suffragist stroke, took a long time to come back, and the Republicans couldn't vote his proxy. Tim Johnson, suffragist stroke, took a long time to come back. Democrats couldn't vote his proxy. Democrats can't vote the proxy of Senator Lujan until he comes back. What happens practically?
Well, nothing particularly controversial or polarizing can happen in the interim until he comes on the floor. It's unlike Nancy Pelosi's House, where you can basically mail in your ballot and vote by proxy. You can't do that in the Senate. You got to show up, and so that means that for however long he is unable to attend a session of the Senate, that the Democrats will not have the numbers they need in order to do anything very controversial.
Now, I'm curious, because I remember wheeling in the great one, Pete Wilson, after surgery, because you needed his vote. They got him in a hospital bed, and they wheeled him in, and Pete Wilson showed up and voted for something back in the 80s before he was governor of California. And I know other senators have overcome illness to show up. But he's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. Do the Republicans take over the gavel?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I guess he's still a member of the Senate, but so I don't think that is the consequence. But certainly when there's a vote on the floor scheduled, Republicans will have the majority.
I just can't imagine that we're going to advance nominees. Why would we? They didn't advance our nominees.
No, we're right now working our way through some Superior Court judges for the District of Columbia, which I can't even imagine why it is the United States Senate has to confirm those, but we do. And so basically Senator Schumer is not able to process any controversial nominees. So that's why we're left handling Superior Court judges for the District of Columbia.
Now, I do know that it takes a long time to stand up a Supreme Court justice. I have put the over-under on the eventual vote on the justice at 65. Do you think I'm high or low?
I think it just depends on who it is. If it's a mainstream jurist, then I think you're probably in the ballpark. If it's a radical, then I think we're going to look at a party line vote. We're not going to treat the nominee the same way that Democrats treated Brett Kavanaugh. We'll be respectful, but we're going to ask the hard questions, and we're going to have a thorough vetting of the nominee. But it really is up to the president.
Now, there are so many big questions coming down the pike. Obviously, the Dobbs case, we're looking forward to the reversal of Roe and Casey. We have a 404 case, Sackett, that will reestablish property rights. We've got a couple of religious liberty cases. And we have a gun control case. I have got a column coming out in the Post today, I think, maybe tomorrow, Senator, that posits Stephen Breyer doesn't want to go out 0 for 6, right? He doesn't want to write 6 dissents. You think there's any chance he comes up with a Breyer rule that we could actually make work about gun control regulation in the United States that honors the Second Amendment rights, which are explicit, but at the same time upholds things like no machine guns for you?
Yeah, well, as you know, things like that require special licenses now already. So, it's an interesting situation because Justice Breyer said he's not leaving until the end of this term, which is, as you know, late June, early July, and so there doesn't appear to me to be any big hurry to confirm somebody to have them sitting around on the shelf waiting for him to retire. I can't imagine he would leave early if he's able to continue to serve, which I think he will be, given the significance of those cases and others that the court has on its docket.
Yeah, I've always said, since when the left began to push him, he's going to stick around to write the dissent in Dobbs. He's going to write that dissent, and the chief is going to write the majority, and it's going to be 6-3 in Roe in case you're going to be history, and we'll go back to the states regulating abortion. But I think he actually could get 8 justices, probably not Justice Sotomayor, for a sane ruling on Second Amendment. Individual right, and we're going to protect it, not with strict scrutiny. We're not going to knock down the machine gun laws, but also not with rational basis. I think there's a Breyer rule to be had if he wants to write it. Am I unduly optimistic?
Well, I'm not as optimistic as you are about that, but look. The members of the court are familiar, or they're very aware, I should say, of the perception of the court, and they want to protect it as an institution. If there's a core of 8 justices who could agree to something that respected the Second Amendment and addressed that case, deciding cases on a case-by-case basis is what they do, not make broad policy pronouncements. So I would guess that would be possible, but I would be a little bit surprised.
Now, Senator, talk to us about the continuing resolution, because now that they're down Senator Lujan, they can't even bring a CR to the floor without the Republican help. Is there a CR to be had that would put us through the election so we can stop with this stuff?
Well, right now they're kicking the can down the road till March or April, and the farther we get into the year, the less likely it is that we'll end up having an omnibus appropriation bill, because the agencies will not even be able to spend all the money that would be appropriated for a full year appropriation bill. So that makes it more likely we'll end up with a year-long CR. I'm concerned that with the uncertainty in Ukraine and with NATO and continuing aggression by the PRC in Asia, that we need to make sure that our military is well funded and prepared for any contingency. That's why we're fighting so hard to make sure that there is at least parity between military spending and domestic spending. That's something the Democrats are fighting. They want to spend more money domestically, even during these times of high inflation, and the federal government just shoveling money out the door generally.
Well, Senator Manchin, your colleague across the aisle, has said BBB is dead. And so if it wasn't dead already, Senator Lujan's absence from the chamber for a few weeks is going to make certain that it's not moving forward. But that defense budget needs to get passed. Is there a separate track that people are pursuing on that?
Well, we're talking about it, and unfortunately, not everybody views that as the priority that I do and you do, and so they want to use that as leverage to get domestic spending done. But all of this is very much up in the air because, frankly, there hasn't been a successful negotiation between Senator Leahy and Senator Shelby, but also, as you point out, Senator Lujan's absence and complicates that further.
Okay, let me close by talking to you about schools, Senator Cornyn. The biggest issue in America politically is moms revolting against school districts. And a lot of moms want to get their kids out of public school. Now, Texas has adopted the English model where face masks are optional, kids come to school, and everything's normal. But in deep blue Beltway land and New York land and among COVID neurotic people, we're still masking K through 6. So people want to get their kids out of public school. Will the Republicans get behind a tax credit for private school spending? Because that seems to me to be the best issue in America right now.
Yeah, Hugh, even in Texas, where we have charter schools, they don't get the same sort of funding that other public schools get. Of course, charter schools are public schools, but yeah, I think that's an important issue. School choice, I think, is more important than ever, given the intransigence of the teacher unions and just the experience people have had at these school board meetings with radical curricula and the attitude that by teachers and administrators that parents don't belong there and their voices shouldn't be heard. I think that's a potent political force in this upcoming election, and I agree with you. A tax credit for sending your child to whatever school that you choose to send them to, I think, would be a powerful message.
It happens to be Catholic School Week, so I'm very following this with the Catholics out there. But a $3,000 a year tax credit off your federal income tax, that would fill every desk in America. That, the marginal cost of that desk in a private school is going to be under $3,000, even though many institutions cost far more than that. Right. And it would revolutionize education. I'm not sure who is our point person for education anymore. It used to be Lamar Alexander. Who takes the lead on that stuff now?
Well, at your suggestion, I will certainly inquire, and if nobody else picks up the ball, I will. I think it's a great idea. School choice. We need some competition with the public school unions, and we need to show that merit is the most important thing in teaching our kids, not the convenience and comfort of organized labor.
Well said, Senator. Last question. Last time we talked, we were talking Lend-Lease for Ukraine. Is it still alive? Is it moving?
It is alive, and it's the consensus position of the senators that are working on a bill that I hope will be released today. The longer we wait, Hugh, Putin's not waiting on us.
No, he's not.
And we need to send a strong message. And we also need to buck up the administration, make sure they continue their commitment to provide Ukraine what they need to defend themselves. And also President Xi and others are looking at the U.S. reaction to what's happening in Ukraine and seeing if they have an opportunity there. So it's very important, and my hope is that comes together today.
All right, last question. I will not be watching the genocide games. I love the Olympics. I'm not watching the genocide games because where they're being staged. Are you going to watch them?
I am not. I'm with you. I think we ought to boycott them, and so I will not.
All right, good to hear it. Senator John Cornyn, always a pleasure. Our friend from Texas leading the way, and hopefully he will become a champion not just of Lend-Lease, but also of the tax credit for parents whose kids are in private school, because we got to break this system that is so indifferent to children. We just must break it. And the way to do that is with a tax credit. ReliefFactor.com. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, breaking news. Until hours ago, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurashi was the head of ISIS. He's dead. The U.S. Special Forces striking in Idlib, Syria, a place that's about 300 miles from Jerusalem. So it's a lot closer to Michael Oren's land than to ours, although I think Michael Oren's in the U.S. today. Former ambassador from Israel to the United States, Dr. Michael Oren. Good morning, Dr. Oren. What's this headline mean to you?
Yeah, it's always welcome news when a leader of ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Hamas or Hezbollah gets to, pass out of this world. ISIS was never particularly viewed as a major threat by Israel, you should know, Hugh. ISIS, from our perspective, was, several thousand men, mostly with light arms, some machine guns on the backs of trucks. Our biggest threat was Hezbollah with 150,000 rockets pointed at our city. That's a major threat. But that doesn't mean we're in any way not relieved to see one of the major commanders of ISIS eliminated.
Yep. It's always good news. Now, let's turn to other news. As a diplomat, Russian diplomats, you've been reading, I'm sure, the Russian diplomatic exchanges with the United States over Ukraine. Russia has condemned U.S. troop deployment this morning. What do you make of it? Do you think Putin ever backs down from the invasion now?
It's difficult. He's up on a high tree or a high ladder, whatever metaphor you choose, and getting him down is not going to be easy. And apparently the United States can't commit to ensuring that Ukraine will never join NATO. Ukraine's a sovereign state. But I think the United States can find some wiggle room in what kind of systems get deployed in the eastern branches of NATO. Those of us who are old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis remember how unsettling it was to have Soviet missiles pointed at Florida in Cuba. So I think there's some wiggle room there. I don't see the Russian incursion of any depth is necessarily a foregone conclusion. I think there's room for diplomacy.
Well, I hope you're right about that. I'm not sure. I do see diplomacy going on in the Middle East with Benny Gantz in Bahrain and the Prime Minister in UAE. What is going to be the response to Yemen? Because this just can't keep going on, Michael Oren. They're sending over ballistic missiles and drones on an almost weekly basis to attack the Emiratis. How long does the Emiratis let this go on?
Well, the Emiratis can strike back. They have actually a battle-proven military. They've been involved militarily in Libya, not just in Yemen, and they're going to strike back. From Israel, this is actually a very significant development because the missiles in the arsenal of the Houthis in Yemen, and keep in mind, the Houthis are an Iranian-backed proxy, those missiles can reach Tel Aviv as well. They can have long-range missiles. So it's not just striking at the UAE or possibly at Bahrain, it's also at us. So the visit of Defense Minister Benny Gantz to Bahrain is rife with significance. It's interesting, Hugh, that he flew there on the cargo plane that originally brought Anwar Sadat to Israel. This is back in November 1977. Then Israel purchased that plane from the Egyptians, and guess what it does today? It is a refueling plane.
Huh.
So you'll agree with me that it's rife with significance that our defense minister flies to Bahrain on a mid-air refueling plane because our aircraft have to be refueled in mid-air. We don't have strategic bombers. We only have fighter bombers. So that is very significant. Significant that he's meeting with the heads of the Fifth Fleet. The Fifth Fleet is stationed in the U.S. Fifth Fleet is stationed in Bahrain. Also, some interesting signals coming out of this visit. It also comes at a time of a major naval drill in the area, and the first time the naval drill with not only forces from the United States and Israel, but also from Saudi Arabia. First time Saudi naval forces have cooperated in a joint drill with the State of Israel.
There is also a headline this morning, which I found interesting over at Times of Israel. Iran set up fake social media network to stoke violence tensions in Israel. This is a page out of Putin's playbook. How does Israel combat it? We rely on the private sector to police this. They're not very good at it yet. What does Israel do?
No, we don't have such a big division between the private sector and the public sector when it comes to cybersecurity. And our private sector tends to trust the government on issues of cybersecurity. Israel accounts for about 20% of the world's investment in cybersecurity. That's since we're 0.02% of the world population, we're punching about 200 times above our weight. Now, no system is foolproof, but Israel does have very robust and significant defenses in that field, and I'm sure we are operating them as we speak.
Now, in terms of playing back whatever they send your way, can Israel deploy the same sort of mischievous use of the internet that Russia has perfected in the United States that Iran is attempting to do versus Israel? Can you actually foment freedom in Iran via the web?
I think we could do an awful lot. I mean, there was several months ago, there was a sudden breakdown of the entire Iranian gas system. All the gas stations, which are run by computers, simply, closed down. And that was widely attributed to Israel. Sending an unequivocal message, a shot across the prow, if you will, that Israel has abilities that the Iranians can't even dream about. And I'm rather confident that we do have those abilities.
Oh, I hope I keep seeing him used. Michael Oren, follow him on Twitter, Dr. Michael Oren, Oren. Good to have you back in the States for a while, Doctor. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Remember the breaking news, another ISIS leader dead, another terrorist gone, another judgment made in the great beyond. Catholics always think on four things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. The ISIS people ought to be thinking about that as well. Stick around, America, on this great station. I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.